Hello, and welcome to this presentation on the importance of neurodiversity affirming practice. My name is Amy Hench, and I am a teacher. I would also like to thank Stephanie Pan, who is an amazing speech language pathologist. We worked together on creating this presentation. So, what are we going to talk about? We're going to define neurodiversity and neurodivergence. We're going to look at neurodiversity affirming practice and language. Then we'll go into some examples of IPP goals and a summary. Neurodiversity just means that our minds are diverse. And within our community, there are lots of different people, lots of brains working in different ways. The neurotypical brain is not superior at all to the neurodivergent brain. Neurodivergence is when our brains differ from neurotypical. For example, an autistic child is neurodivergent. Communities are neurodiverse, but individuals are neurodivergent or neurotypical. The most common types of neurodivergence you've likely heard of are autism, dyspraxia, dyslexia, acquired brain disorders such as brain injuries or stroke, and ADHD. The label of autism, there is a little bit of controversy, but most adults with autism prefer to be called autistic adults than adults with autism. So I've tried to use that throughout my presentation. It is individual, so if you are working with autistic children or adults, please ask them what they would like. Masking is a really important thing to be aware of. Autistic masking is when an autistic person hides so many of their traits and identity in order to appear more neurotypical. As you can imagine, this leads to so much anxiety, depression, and burnout, and we do see a higher risk of suicide in individuals who are masking more often. Part of the purpose of this presentation is to encourage you to create a community where autistic children and adults do not have to mask their autism or personality traits. Here we go into neurodiversity affirming practice. So, neurodiversity is not denying that a child needs supports or has a disability. It's not having low expectations and thinking whatever goes. It's definitely not patronizing. It's not forcing kids or adults to be independent or putting independent goals on top of other goals. And it's not creating dependence either. We want to support individuals who are neurodivergent or neurotypical with other disabilities. We don't want to cure their neurodivergence, nor do we think that they're going to catch up. Doing phonics training does not cure dyslexia any more than any type of thing cures autism. We're supporting people, not fixing them. We're advocating for a strengths-based approach, presuming potential in the child and family. Our goals, again, are not to turn the child into a neurotypical one. We accept all forms of play and all forms of communication. Presuming potential means that everyone has the potential to learn and grow. We start where they're at with the strengths that they have. We make sure that we're providing dynamic environment with enriching teaching and lots of ongoing assessment. For a strengths-based approach, we're focusing on the whole child, their abilities and possibilities, finding out their interests and their strengths and what they need to be successful, both themselves, but also identifying barriers to what's holding them back. I just wanted to bring up applied behavior analysis because it is not a neurodivergent affirming practice. ABA uses prompting by an adult who is generally neurotypical to create a very specific response in the child. It is not at all a strengths-based approach, and I invite you to check out autisticadvocacy.org for more information on ABA. Another note on another acronym, PDA, or pathological demand avoidance, is considered a subset of autism. The neurodiversity affirming community prefers to call it a persistent demand for autonomy, as that's what it is. It's typically a fight or flight sympathetic nervous system response to something To the child or adult, it seems life threatening to them in the moment. So, looking at neurodiversity affirming language, it's so important because it helps to break down stigmas and create a safe and respectful place. Remembering we're all complex. Echolalia is communication, and it's when something is repeated back either right away or later. But it is always communication. It always has a meaning to the child, and it's up to us to find out what that meaning is. So, functioning labels are another aside. Using labels like high and low functioning are not fantastic because high functioning can totally dismiss the need for support. And sometimes with high functioning, I've heard people say, are they really autistic? And that's never for us to decide. Low functioning, as you can imagine, if you're referred to as low functioning, really undermines your dignity as a human being. Another program that is not neurodiversity affirming is the social thinking program that a lot of us are familiar with at school. It tries to turn neurodivergent children into neurotypical ones using eye contact, referring to children who prefer routines as having a rock brain, telling them that their behavior is unexpected, and forcing them to turn their bodies towards a speaker. These things do not affirm our neurodivergent experiences. So, in thinking about whole body listening, let's consider a different way of looking at it. Instead of writing a goal that George will use whole body listening at circle time, let's consider that George will effectively communicate his needs for environmental supports to facilitate successful learning. And then we can get into specific things about that goal. Think about how different that sounds from saying that George will sit crisscross applesauce on the carpet and turn his body towards the teacher. Here's some don't say this, say that ideas for you to consider. Like nonverbal can be non speaking, rigidities can be prefers routine. A big one for me is deficit versus difference, and referring to a child's passions as things they're passionate about instead of talking about them being obsessed or fixated on something. When it comes to play, we don't ever want to force a child to play in a different way. Everybody's play works for them and serves a purpose for them. So I prefer not to use the label of functional play and instead to embrace the type of play that the child enjoys. We could change the wording from functional play to typical play if we really want to do that, but we don't want to ever force autistic kids to imitate the play routines of their neurotypical peers. This creates masking. I love this quote just about play and how we can support neurodivergent children and all children in play that works for them. So another thing around social thinking is to force a child to join the group with their body, with their face, and instead allow them to participate in a way that works for them. I've been reminded dozens of times with my students that just because they're not sitting and looking at me does not mean that they're not listening to what I am saying. So let's look at some neurodiversity affirming IPP goals. They feel good to write and work on. They don't feel icky. They're easy to write and easy to target because they work for everyone and they help the child develop in the real world. They never force kids to speak. They don't ever force kids to mask their autism, and overall they don't push our autistic kids to be like neurotypical ones. We support language development, authentic social interactions, and emotional well being. The goal should be motivating to all of us, both as adults and for the kids and their families. Here's an example of a goal that's not at all neurodiversity affirming. When you consider making George use eye contact, maybe nodding his head or vocalizing that he understands. This does not at all appreciate where George may be and what his strengths are and his way to communicate. In a better way, we could say George will communicate for a variety of reasons. He'll develop expressive communication skills to connect. And this is where we can really support George and his classmates with their communication. Some receptive language goals. We can use terms like when regulated because we know that many of our neurodivergent children or clients are struggling with emotional regulation. We can also talk about their preferred play when we're writing goals about following directions. I prefer to say demonstrate understanding of something during play activities. Following a unfamiliar one-step direction is a very closed-ended goal that really doesn't do anything for the child. Also, rethink our cultural norms and IPP goals rather than telling kids to talk louder or speak out more in class. Think about what may be culturally appropriate for that child, and you can talk to their family about what might be a good way to get through something that is causing an issue in class. Our conclusion is that our job is to support kids in becoming who they already are. We want to help kids become the very best versions of themselves. Thank you so much for listening.